This is the Full Spectrum Parent Podcast, the only faith-based autism podcast on the web. Here are your hosts, Greg and Jessica Hurlbut.
Well, welcome to episode 3 of the Full Spectrum Parent Podcast. Today's episode title is Discipline, and I am your host, Greg Hurlbut.
And this is Jessica Hurlbut. And each week we want to offer you guys a dose of help, a dose of humor, and a dose of hope.
So we just want to thank all of you who have taken the time to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I think we have right now about 65 great reviews. We really appreciate that. It's actually really honoring just to read them, and so thankful we're reaching some people. Again, if you like what you're hearing, share it. Leave a review, share it on Facebook, or however you do those things. You can subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube or a video version. But yeah, we love hearing from you, so please go ahead and do that.
And each week, something that we kind of decided, and we talked about a few weeks ago, we want to highlight a real life hero. Sometimes being a special needs parent or somebody that works in that field, you kind of feel invisible.
Yeah.
But I believe there are a lot of Clark Kents, real life heroes that are hiding in disguise. And I just want to highlight this week, Tracy Johnson. She reached out to me a couple weeks ago, never met her before, but she found me on Facebook and she heard of our podcast. And she is like, wow, I don't if I could just do a clap right now, but I can't because of the microphone. I'll probably mess up sound. But you should clap right now because Tracy is a single mom of 5. Okay, so imagine my crazy life, but all by yourself. A single mom of 5. She's also a speech pathologist at an elementary school. So she's working with, kids with struggles every day. She's adopted 3 of her 5 children, and their age ranges are 5, 3, and 2. But that's not all. 2 of those, the 3 and the 2-year-old, have autism. So Tracy, you are amazing. I'm sure you don't hear it enough. I know you get the hugs and the kisses from your kids, but listen, one day you are going to be rewarded greatly for every sacrifice that you're making. And it might, be when you're in heaven, but I promise you, God sees every single choice you've made and he's going to honor you. So,
yeah, great job, Tracy. Seriously, there are many days where Jess and I have thought, how can we even keep our minds straight? And that's when, we work really hard to do it together and to be on the same page. For someone doing it alone, at least in the home, that's really difficult. And so I hope you have a great church family around you. If you don't, I'd suggest going out and finding a church. Anybody that's out there and listening, feeling alone, that's what the church is meant to be. It's a part of the family of God. I would always encourage you to try to get connected. I know not all church experiences have been great for a lot of people, but try again. Jessica put out a post recently. Just try again. You can find a great community out there who loves people, loves God, and wants to be with you in your time and your difficulties. So yes, today we are talking about discipline, a real hot topic when it comes to parenting, whether you have kids on the spectrum or not. Parenting can be a very difficult thing to navigate. And so Jessica put a post on her Facebook recently, just said, what are the greatest struggles that you have as a parent when you think about discipline? And so we're going to talk about the top 3 of those today. And the first one we're going to talk about is, and this is really the top response, I think, out of all of the comments and the responses, most people said consistency. That consistency is a hard thing for them, whether it means I told my kids one thing, but then I didn't follow through with it.
That's so me, by the way.
I would say our struggle is I hear Jessica warn them a lot, and I always say, I have no warnings.
No, they're I call them empty threats. I mean, I don't say that to my kids. I make them think they're real threats.
They know they're not real.
They know they're not real.
They know they're not real. And so, often, even in this can happen not just in discipline ways, but you have a mom and a dad, or you have a couple people as the parents in a relationship, and one of them maybe is the person who says yes a lot, and there's a person who says no a lot. So the kids don't even ask me, honestly. She gets badgered all day long about questions and things because they pretty much know dad's first reaction might be no. You know, hey, can we go to the store and get ice cream? No, you know, I'm not. That makes me sound horrible.
Yeah,
as a
you're
parent,
not that mean.
I'm not like that, but I generally am going to think through real quick, and I have a lot more limitations on them than maybe Jessica would. And the same comes to discipline. They know if Dad says something that basically, I'm going to say this, and I know this is a Christian podcast, come hell or high water, I'm going to follow through with it. And so consistency absolutely matters. Like, your kids do have to know that what you say you're going to do. And honestly, I would say that it's what brings at least some order to your home. Now listen, if you came to my house, you know, I think sometimes people even picture us as pastors, and even though we have difficult, you know, kids with special needs, and we've adopted kids, that probably everything's picture perfect. And if you come to our church, you know it's not, because I tell the stories all the time.
Or you see them running amok in the church. So
it's not. You know, we have some crazy stories about parenting, and it's not about control. I think we talked about that in one of our episodes just a little bit. Like, your goal can't be with discipline to control your child. It's never going to work. You cannot control them. From the minute they begin moving beyond a crawl or a roll, to control them becomes nearly impossible. Then add numbers to the group where you become outnumbered when you have 5 kids or 3 kids. It becomes impossible. So you can't have control as the goal for discipline, or even why you have consistency. The real reason around discipline, I wanted to start this, is you gotta look at it as a shaping point of view. I want to shape my kids so that when they become adults, when they become bigger kids, that they are turning into the people first that we want them to be, maybe that we want Christ, or the as the way the Bible teaches. We want them to be good people in this world, reflecting the image that they have on them. And so I want to shape them, and discipline actually does shape them. And so consistency matters. You've got to do what you say you're going to do. But before I kind of end just the thought about consistency, I want to say this. It isn't everything, because if you came to our house, what you would realize is, like I said, come hell or high water, I want to follow through with what I said. But sometimes my emotions and my reactions to something my kids are doing is honestly too high. Maybe it's a frustration, it's something they've repeatedly done. So like, I'll just take a silly story of my son. It's not really silly, but it's become silly because I had to learn to let things go. My son, Isaac, for some reason feels that the upholstery in our car is something he can just carve his name into. So I got in the car one day and I look over at the dash, and there I see Isaac scribed into the dash of our Honda Pilot. And I'm like, what the? And so I go, Isaac, what is this? And he's like, oh, I didn't do it. I'm like, it's your name. Like, you can't even hide that
Emma
this
did
was
it.
you. You know, so I'm like, buddy, you can't do that kind of thing. And actually, he didn't even get in trouble for it. I just said, you can't do that. So then about 3 weeks later, I open up the hatch to my Honda Pilot. Inscribed on the side panels is, I love you, Dad. Yeah. I'm like, I'm reading a nice note from my son to me, but mostly I'm thinking of ways to kill him. Like, stop destroying my very expensive vehicle. This is ridiculous. And so I got angry, and I probably, and immediately gave him this terrible punishment. You're going to spend 2 weeks with no Wii or no Switch. Their game systems are one of the best tools that we use to discipline them. And sometimes I'll walk back from a moment like that after my emotion is down. I'm like, you know what? That was too harsh. But then I have this fight within me that says, oh, but I said this, and so I got to follow through. But sometimes as a parent, the best thing you can do is realize, yeah, maybe you stepped over the line even too far yourself. Right. And so consistency can't be about control. It can't only be about following through. At the end of the day, consistency and discipline still has to be about the person. You are trying to shape that little person. And so whatever you're doing to discipline them, you have to evaluate, is this actually shaping them a good way? Or maybe are they just going to come out a year from now hating me because I just kind of laid the law down every time I could get a chance? It can't be about that either. But you still have to have consistency in that.
Mm-hmm. So as far as the top 2 struggle with discipline that I heard from people on social media was, and this was a lot more from the special needs moms or parents, was the idea of, how do I determine, and I totally get this struggle, if what my child's doing is sheer defiance, or if it's a behavior or an issue with their special needs.
Right.
Yes. Autism is just my wheelhouse. So perfect example would be my daughter Mara. So if I disciplined her every single time she yelled,
we would
that would
literally
be my
do
whole
nothing
life.
else. Yes.
And that sounds very discouraging. So I'm not trying to discourage people, but there's a reality with my daughter Mara that she doesn't fully understand. She can't fully communicate. So a lot of times she yells. I'm brushing her hair in the morning. She yells at me instead of saying, "That hurts, Mommy," because that would be an appropriate response, right? And so it's kind of like my husband was saying, like there's some times where I have to give grace and realize this isn't about her being defiant. This is autism right now. But then treading that line, because you can go, the pendulum can go one way, and you're just like, oh, they're autistic, poor them. Like we can never discipline them. And I encourage you not to do that. The truth is they're a lot smarter than you think. And we've tested this in weird ways. We've literally, been at a playground and called all the kids back to the car, and, Mara or Jacob, both of which have autism, they just ignore us and they're still playing, and we're like, they don't understand. They don't understand we're leaving. And so we'll just test it and pull away slowly, and all of a sudden, they're crying, Mommy, wait. No, they understand. So there's definitely times and moments where their behavior is intentional and that some kind of discipline needs to occur. But at the same breath that I say that, I want to tell you that discipline is not a one-size-fits-all. Okay?
Oh my gosh, never.
So if you have 1 kid, you have 5 kids, you have 10 kids, your friend has a kid, okay, whatever they do to discipline their kids doesn't necessarily work for your child. And the more children you have, the more you realize this, right? And not even just talking special needs. For example, my daughter Emma, who we've adopted, if you come at her with a harsh tone or like, some kind of, like a spanking or something like that, this thing wells up within her, and she doesn't hear you. She doesn't respond. She just gets angrier and angrier, and it actually causes her bad behaviors to escalate further. And so in those situations, discipline still is required, but it can't be maybe what I would, do with my typical teenage son or something. So you really have to kind of know your child, begin to see what works, what doesn't work. And the other thing I say with that, and a lot of comments I heard from people, was husbands and wives or couples not being on the same page. And I totally get that, because my husband is more consistent. I'm not as much. I let things go. He needs more grace. So I think we can balance each other out. But what has to happen is, instead of in the moment when our child's having a meltdown or misbehaving, this is what has happened with us far too many times. He's wanting to handle it one way. I'm getting mad at him. We start arguing with each other. The child's like now out of the picture, and we're mad at each other. It just becomes this huge thing. So it really helps to just have a time, like a night, where you're intentionally going to sit down. Let's just talk. What do you feel like? How can we best discipline our child? And come to compromises, because you're not going to see eye to eye fully, but be able to say, okay, well, I don't like when you do this. What if we looked at doing it this way? So that you guys have a plan of action. So when the next meltdown or the next behavior arises, it's kind of this unspoken thing. We already know, okay, this is what happens next. And if it doesn't occur that way, well, I can call, just say, for example, Greg out and say, well, I thought we talked about this, right? I thought this is how we were going to handle this situation. So I just encourage you guys in that way, just as far as,
Yeah, as couples or parents or people co-parenting, as people who have children living in different homes, people who are separated from, so kids are living in different homes, and they might have one set of rules in that home and another set of rules.
Yeah.
All of those things are so difficult to navigate, whether you're living in the same home or not. But you have to try to be purposeful to do it, or else it is very difficult for that child or any child to really navigate life and understanding what's expected of them and what they're supposed to be like. And so even I would encourage, I know that sometimes divorces happen, separations happen, where it seems almost impossible to talk to the other person. Do your best. That's at the end of the day, do your best. And we even had to realize, living in the same home, we're both real strong personalities. We're both pretty opinionated people. And so we would have opinions in those moments. We realized, right now isn't the moment to
No.
deal with that. And even for me, I had to realize there are times when I have to let it go right now till I'm in an actual normal space of mind where I'm not just trying to win or win a fight, win with my kid. Sometimes we just go to this win attitude, even as a parent. Like, I'm just going to win with my kid here. This, my 13-year-old is just going to keep bringing reasons and excuses and whys. And I'm just like, you say one more excuse, like, you're not going to be able to talk for a year. And then I just getting angry after, okay, I better chill out and calm down and deal with this in a moment where I'm in a healthy space of mind. So, yeah, I would encourage you to do your best to get on the same page. I want to go back real quick to the idea of special needs kids. Like, it's difficult to find what punishing looks like for them, but I would really encourage you. And it took me a long time, and Jessica maybe was a little more timid about it, but I realized quickly with Mara and Jacob, but that they understood a decent amount when they were doing something what they shouldn't be doing. Even especially when Mara in past was more physically inclined towards us or towards the other kids. I laid it down. You are not hitting people. You are not choking people. You are not pushing each other down. And so we found places where she realized it. And now actually, I remember when after enough times of disciplining her to realize that she would get in trouble, I would take things away from her. She wouldn't get her ice cream. I mean, ice cream is the world to her. Now listen, sometimes the reaction for Mara, anytime I discipline her, the reaction is far worse than even how she was acting. And I had to push through this reality of now she's going to scream even more because I just took her ice cream away. Now she's going to scream even more because I took her iPad away. Now she's going to scream even more. And it would get to a place where she began to realize, if I don't do this thing, or if I do what Daddy's not saying I'm supposed to do, then I'm not going to get what I want. And you got to use those things. But it's usually you got to push past this hard place, especially with kids with autism, for them to even learn it. And actually, if your kids are in ABA, or any of those kinds of classes in their school system, that's really what they're doing. It's a reward system and a taking away system. If you do X, then you get this. And we've learned to do those things well with Mara and push past sometimes where she is very vocal. Jacob, our son who's autistic, he's not overly vocal, but Mara screams every hour of every day. There is a scream for some reason or anger for some reason. And then sometimes it goes as fleeting as it comes, and sometimes it lasts hours.
Well, along that same line, too, another phrase that changed my world, and this can be true even of toddlers, you don't have to have special needs kids, but was offering them these choices: fun or room.
Yep.
Because the truth is, if a child's having a meltdown, a tantrum, whatever it is, special needs or not, they are not allowed to completely destroy the environment for the rest of the family.
Yeah.
So that you can have your meltdown, but it has to be in your room. But if you want to have fun, you have to control yourself. And that really has helped, even with special needs kids, even with my daughter Emma, who has, sometimes just bursts of, stubbornness and anger. They don't want to be in their room. They don't, and sometimes it takes them 15, 20 minutes of being mad in their room, but then they can come out when they're calm, right? When they want to have fun. Because it's those boundaries of it's not even just about the child that's misbehaving, but it's also about, for us, big thing for us is the environment of the rest of the house. It can't be screaming 24/7 in our house. That's not fair to everyone else. And so really trying to find that. So
the last biggest struggle that people listed was overreacting, and then how to deal with that as a parent. We already kind of discussed a little bit about that. There's a place where all of us overreact. I get angry. I always say now, as a little bit older person, realizing, and a lot, this is true, if you read through psychology and things, a lot of people can identify a go-to emotion of theirs. So sometimes it's just sadness, right? Or even crying. Some people just cry whether they're happy, sad, angry, mad, or anything in between. For me, my go-to emotion, unfortunately, I would say, is anger. I tend to be mad. Even if an injustice is happening, I'm mad. If someone hurts my feelings, I'm mad. If someone does something against me, I'm mad. If my kids disrespect me, I get mad. There's this anger thing that I've had to deal with as a parent and as a person that I had to get through. And so I've had plenty plenty of overreactions as a parent. And I want to say this to all you men out there or women out there
Yes.
who call themselves the yeller in the family, or maybe you thought as you were parenting, or maybe you were yelled at as a kid and you thought, I'll never yell as a parent. Well, and then that changes and you realize, man, I can be just as crazy, or I can... Listen, it's not the end of the world. But the way to make it not the end of the world, and the way to make your overreactions not damage your children, I really believe is one thing. You have to admit you were wrong.
Right.
And I cannot tell you how many times I have gone to every single one of my kids and apologized to them and said, hey, when Dad acted that way, I crossed the line. And even my son now, who's 13, says, oh, I know you weren't really mad at me, Dad. You were mad, because I'll have my son work with me doing construction. I'll hurt myself or something will go wrong, and I'm getting all just frustrated and grumpy, and I'll be like, Jared, just pick that up. Why didn't you do that? Or, hey, help me. Why aren't you doing this? And I get this frustrated tone. And then after the fact, I'm like, you know what? I just made that a miserable experience for my son. I'm going to go and apologize. And I go and I say, son or Jeremiah, I'm sorry that I acted that way. I should not have acted that way. I am asking Jesus to change me. And he goes, I know you weren't even mad at me, Dad. I said, no, but that's not an excuse. I don't want to be that way. And so I'm telling you, as a parent, when you make a mistake, just own it and apologize. Because I'll tell you, when they get older, they're not going to remember all the bad moments you think they will. They're going to remember an overarching sense of love that you have for them. And even in those bad moments, they're going to remember Dad came and said he was sorry. Mom came and apologized. Mm-hmm. They're going to see, I'm not perfect. We're not perfect. The only father we have that's perfect is God, and I'm doing my best. But even inside me, I've told my son bluntly, I have broken parts of me from my life too. And sometimes they come out and they hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. And, so you got to do your best to really be a parent who operates in a spirit of love and not just a spirit of anger, even though we know that all of us have some anger at times.
Right. That's really good. So we're just going to move on to the dose of humor real quick. And this is just a really silly story. I actually spoke last Sunday at our church, and I referenced it also. But growing up, I grew up in a home where there really wasn't much discipline. I had parents that loved me, but the side of discipline was kind of lacking. And thankfully, I was kind of just the good kid. Some of my siblings were bad, but I was like, I wanted to follow the rules. Mm-hmm. I was quiet. I didn't do a lot to get in trouble, so there wasn't really a need for discipline. Well, around the age of 15 or 16, my mom got a hold of a book that was it was a Christian book about spanking. And I know there's a lot of different views, and we're actually going to talk a little bit more about, this idea later on spanking, but my mom just thought it was just brilliant. So she's like, oh, this is the answer to everything. I should have spanked my kids when they were growing up. So, a couple weeks later, I'm at the house. I'm hanging out with my best friend. My boyfriend's there, and we're joking around. And she hears our conversation from the other room, and I keep talking. I keep saying the S word. Now, it's not the swear word, but it was the word suck. Oh, that sucks so much. I can't believe that. Oh, this is such a bummer. And she's like, I hate that word. You're not going to say that word in my house. And I'm just like, okay, Mom, suck isn't a bad word. And she freaked out on me. And she was like, you're going to have to get a spanking. And I'm like, I'm 15 years old. I've never even had a spanking. So she, if you're on the podcast, you won't see this, but if you see the video, she pulls out a rubber spatula. Now, it was pretty pathetic. It was like a flimsy little nothing. So, and with my best friend and my boyfriend, just right there, she's like, we're going to go into the bathroom and you're going to get a spanking. And I just laughed and laughed and laughed. And then she got angry and was like, if you don't stop laughing, I have to give you another spanking. Well, it didn't hurt at all. So it was pretty ridiculous. But so, the truth is all of this is trial and error. And that was one of my mom's trials that did not work. And we're all in the same boat, guys. So I just wanted to encourage you guys with that.
So just so you know too, we're not against spanking, and I'm not also for spanking.
Right.
I think that spanking is a tool that is appropriate in our children's lives in the right manner, in the right way, and in the right spirit. It doesn't work for every child, so don't do it for every child. And if your goal is fairness in your discipline, it's never going to look fair. My son brings that up all the time. Well, that's not fair. I'm like, well, if you want to trade lives with your daughter Mara, who never gets spanked ever because she has autism, well, then you can do that. You want to trade whole lives with her? And then he goes, no, I don't want to trade lives with her. Because fairness isn't going to always look. My daughter Emma, we talked about, who's one of our adopted kids, she has... at the end of the day, she probably is a lot like me, even though she's not my blood child. She is just like me, and we are probably two of the most obstinate human beings that have existed on the planet. And so when I started by trying to spank her, well, she just got more and more defiant. It did nothing. So eventually I came to a place where I realized, I'm giving up on this. I'm not going to spank her. And I had to actually be more purposeful in saying, what will work with disciplining her? And we've found that now. It works completely different. In fact, what I realized with her is choice is a huge deal. And even when they're two bad choices, if I give her a choice, like I let her choose her discipline sometimes, because then she feels like there's a little bit of her say in it, and it works. And I don't want to be so stuck as a parent that it has to go exactly the way I picture it. And so we're not against that, but really I wanted to address the scripture as we end. I know we're kind of a few minutes longer than we normally are, but this was a big topic. So Proverbs 13:24 is actually where this saying comes in Christianity, spare the rod, spoil the child. I don't know if you've heard that before, and it's kind of talked about in this, it's almost like an angry sense. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Like, right. you should be spanking that kid. You should be beating that kid. Like,
beat the devil out of him.
Right. We have this attitude around it, which is not the right attitude in which this wording has come from. But I'll just say that's not the scripture at all. That's a saying that Christians have come up with, but It's not what it says. In Proverbs 13:24, I'm going to read it to you. It says this: those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. That's what it says. Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. And first off, Proverbs is a book of wisdom. That's what it's about. And it's giving you these little one-liners to kind of help in life. And so there's this idea of spare the rod of discipline, you hate your children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. And the whole picture there is actually the picture of a shepherd who had a rod, which that rod was the representation for that shepherd and his sheep on how he guided them, how he cared for them. Sometimes he would use the rod to pull them back into the group when they got lost. Sometimes he would stop them from doing things. But that rod was never a picture of anger. It was never a picture of just beating someone with it. It was a representation of care. And so when it says the rod of discipline, I've actually seen some translations that I would just bluntly say is wrong. It's a wrong translation if it puts the word spanking in there. That is not what the Bible says. It says those who spare the rod of discipline. And the idea here is really a picture, a symbol, more than a literal item. It was a picture that this rod of caring, disciplining, and shaping your child. Right. And if you spare them from discipline, if you spare them from shaping them, guiding, well, then you, in a sense, it says you hate them, which the Bible is full of very hyperbolistic language. I don't want to get into a whole talk about that. But the idea is like, if you really care about them, if you love them, you will shape them, you will discipline them. And I believe at times, sure, spanking is a good idea. At times it's taking away something that they love. At times it's, not allowing them to go to the event that they wanted to go to. But we should have discipline in our kids' lives to help shape them for the future and who they're called to be. Right.
I mean, I'm reminded of the verse that says in Psalms, your rod and staff comfort me. Yep. So we don't think about spanking and comfort, right? So the analogy there was really one of guiding, no, over here, guys, this way, guys. There was a gentleness to that, So yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate and just everything that Greg's been saying, but at the end of the day, it can't just be about rules when it comes to discipline. It has to be about maintaining our relationship with our kids. Does that mean they get to do whatever they want whenever they want? Of course not. But what that does mean is I care less about the fact that you failed in this way or you didn't do your chores or anything. My relationship with you and to make sure we're okay here is more important than all of these external things that we can easily fight over. Because what happens is a lot of times you get so focused on these discipline, these nitty gritty things. You said you do this, that it drives a wedge in between you and your kids. And that doesn't mean there isn't boundaries and there isn't consequences. But every day, when you go to bed every night, I want you to think, am I in right standing with my kids? Like, are we good? Yeah. Do they know, even if I messed up and I overreacted or I got too mad, do they know that I love them? Do they know that I care about what's going on inside of them right now or what's going on at school? Like, that connection is what is going to make them be the person that God's called them to be. It's not going to just be like this 27 list of rules and I'm going to, hammer them into your brain. Because it has to be, like we've talked about in other shows, it has to be an internal thing, right? God works from us from the inside out, and it's the same thing with our kids, right? So, and this is just a total side note, but if you're looking for a really good parenting book that we just gleaned a lot from, Danny Silk has a parenting book called Loving Your Kids on Purpose. I believe he also has like a video or DVD series. It's super good, and it's all about this idea of allowing your children to have some freedom, just like God's given us freedom when he put us in the garden. He gave us that freedom to choose, to allow our kids to make choices in their life, but in a safe environment where they can fail and we can help direct them through that. It's just an awesome resource. Just wanted to throw that out there. So I think we're kind of coming to an end. So I just want to leave you with this prayer and thank you guys for tuning in and sending in all your questions. It's been super helpful as far as formatting our show. So we just want to pray for you right now. And I just pray that God would give you the wisdom to be the best parent that you can be. Mm-hmm. May he give you the grace to love your kids when they fall and when they fail. And may he give you the faith to trust an unknown future to a known God. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Full Spectrum Parent Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave a review.